It was a cold December night in 1971. The steel bars of San Quentin prison rattled with the wind. Inside one of America's most notorious cells, a man sat quietly, his long hair tangled, his piercing eyes staring straight into nothingness. This wasn't just any prisoner. This was Charles Manson, the cult leader whose twisted mind had commanded others to kill, and now, even behind bars, his power wasn't over. Because the real horror, his influence had just begun to grow. Charles Manson, a name that sent chills through America in the late 1960s. The man who never killed with his own hands, yet orchestrated some of the most gruesome murders in modern history. You might think that once locked away, his story ended. That prison walls would silence his voice forever. But the truth, prison became his stage, and within those walls, Manson built a darker kind of empire, one fueled not by weapons, but by mind control, manipulation, and fear. Tonight, we're going behind those bars, to uncover how Manson, even in chains, managed to bend others to his will. Charles Mills Manson was born in 1934 in Cincinnati, Ohio. His childhood was anything but normal. His mother was an alcoholic, often in and out of jail, and his father was absent from the very beginning. By the time most kids were learning how to ride a bike, Charles was learning how to survive. At age 9, he committed his first petty crime. By 13, he was already bouncing between reform schools. And by his 20s, Manson was no stranger to prison life. In fact, he once said prison was the only place that ever truly felt like home. But here's the chilling part. Prison didn't reform Manson, it trained him. He studied people, their weaknesses, their fears, their desires. He devoured books on psychology, self-help, and even occult practices. And when he got out in the late 1960s, he put those lessons into practice, gathering broken souls, young people searching for meaning, and molding them into what the world would come to know as the Manson family. What happened next would shock America forever. But as brutal as the Tate LaBianca murders were, the darker story was only beginning, inside the prison walls. When Charles Manson was sentenced to life in prison in 1971, many believed it was the end of his story. But in reality, it was just a change of location. Because prison walls don't stop influence. And for someone like Manson, charismatic, manipulative, and obsessed with power, incarceration became a new kind of stage. Inside San Quentin and later other California prisons, Manson quickly developed a reputation. He wasn't like the average inmate. He wasn't a gangster. He wasn't a thief. He was something more dangerous, an ideologue. A man who could twist words into weapons. Inmates would gather around his cell, listening to his rants about society, the government, and the coming apocalypse he once called helter-skelter. Some laughed, some ignored him, but others, they fell under his spell, just like the followers on the outside once had. And that was the frightening part. Manson didn't need freedom to spread his message. He only needed an audience. But the truth was far more disturbing. Prison reports revealed that Manson often manipulated weaker inmates. He convinced some to follow strict routines, shave their heads, and even act as his bodyguards. Rumors spread that he could control minds, using the same psychological tricks he once used to recruit vulnerable teenagers. Imagine this. A man convicted of orchestrating brutal murders, now creating a miniature cult inside maximum security. Guards noticed it too. Manson's followers inside would defend him fiercely, even attack other inmates who disrespected him. To some prisoners, he was a prophet. To others, a manipulator who thrived on chaos. What happened next shocked everyone. Manson began receiving letters, thousands of them, from people outside. Young men and women, curious about his philosophy, wrote to him, desperate for guidance. Some even tattooed X's and swastikas on their foreheads to match him, showing loyalty from miles away. Even behind bars, his cult didn't die, it evolved. And through carefully crafted letters and prison visits, he still managed to control lives on the outside. The FBI later confirmed that several small cult groups in the 1980s traced their origins back to prison correspondence with Manson. He wasn't just an inmate. He was a brand of evil, continuing to inspire long after his crimes. The deeper Manson sank into prison life, the darker his legend grew. He wasn't just another inmate counting days, he was a man obsessed with keeping control, even when he had nothing left. Inside San Quentin, Manson's reputation became mythic. Guards described him as small in size but terrifying in presence. His piercing eyes, his unpredictable outbursts, he could switch from calm philosopher to raging monster within seconds. But what scared people the most was his ability to influence without touching. One infamous incident still haunts prison reports. A guard recalled how Manson whispered to another inmate, "Just a few words, nothing more." Minutes later, that inmate attacked someone viciously in the yard. To outsiders it looked random. But those who knew Manson believed he had planted the seed, giving silent orders only his followers understood. It was as if his control was invisible, like a poison in the air. But the truth was far more disturbing. Manson didn't just manipulate people. He used symbols and music as weapons. He scratched cryptic swastikas and occult-like drawings on his cell walls. He sang twisted versions of songs, strumming on a prison guitar when allowed, weaving hidden messages into his lyrics. To some inmates, it sounded like nonsense. To others, it was scripture. And then came the fire incident. Reports say Manson once set his cell on fire, smiling as guards rushed to put it out. When questioned, he simply said, "I don't live in your world. I live in mine." What happened next shocked everyone. Manson began receiving visitors, outsiders who treated him like a prophet. Some of them smuggled messages for him. Others claimed he gave them missions. There were even rumors of escape plots, though none ever succeeded. Each time investigators dug deeper, they found the same thing: a trail of manipulation, words twisted into commands, and broken minds desperate to please him. And here's the chilling reality. Even decades after his original crimes, Manson still controlled people without ever leaving his cell. Charles Manson never walked free again. For the rest of his life, he was moved between some of California's toughest prisons, San Quentin, Folsom, and Corcoran. Each transfer was the same story. Chaos followed him. Officials kept him isolated for long stretches, fearing his influence on other inmates. And yet, letters from outsiders, thousands of them, still poured in. From teenagers curious about his philosophy, to hardened criminals who called him a teacher, Manson's name continued to attract. But time has a way of stripping away illusions. As the years passed, Manson's fiery energy turned into rambling madness. His interviews from the 1980s and 90s became infamous: wild eyes, strange hand gestures, cryptic riddles that made little sense. Some laughed at him, others still feared him. Because even in his madness, there was something unsettling. A reminder that his words had once been enough to command murder. What happened next shocked everyone. In 2017, Charles Manson died at the age of 83. But his death didn't end the story. His ashes were fought over, his belongings auctioned, and his legacy dissected in countless documentaries, books, and films. And chillingly, small cults dedicated to his teachings still exist today. Proof that his mind control, born decades earlier, left scars that may never fully heal. Charles Manson remains one of the most disturbing figures in American history, not just because of the crimes his followers committed, but because of the way he controlled them. He proved something terrifying: that true power isn't always about weapons or violence. Sometimes, it's about the ability to bend minds. Even behind bars, stripped of freedom, Manson showed how dangerous a manipulator can be. Prison was supposed to silence him. Instead, it gave him a darker kind of stage. Charles Manson wasn't just a prisoner. He was a symbol of how fragile the human mind can be when confronted with manipulation and fear. And his story reminds us, sometimes the most dangerous killers don't hold knives, they hold influence. This wasn't just life behind bars. It was a kingdom of control, built on words, symbols, and fear. And in our next episode, we'll uncover an even darker secret from the world of true crime. Make sure to subscribe, and remember, evil doesn't die, it just finds a new cell to live in.